a really great question and something that we think about quite deeply. So let me start by saying that in India, when you compare the diets of rural and urban India, the key difference emerges in the affordability factor, and the availability factor. So you have a lot more foods available throughout the year in urban India, and people can afford them. So when people get richer, they tend to consume more of everything. Now it really depends on the consumer's preferences as to what they choose to eat, right? So we've seen throughout our surveys that while people do consume more, say, animal source foods, and they consume more vegetables and fruits if they get more money, they also choose to eat more ultra processed foods and ready to eat products, right? The same thing is happening and playing out in rural India as we speak. So as incomes have increased, what we've noticed is that there's been an increase in consumption of ultra processed foods, and which is kind of outpacing the increase in the healthier foods like fruits and vegetables. And that is chiefly driven by the preferences of the households, right? Now, that could come from either having lesser knowledge about what's healthy, which is because, as you know, nutrition in Indian schools is barely touched upon. It's not a subject taught like mathematics, it's not taught like geography. Nutrition is barely touched upon. Even students don't know exactly what an actual healthy diet constitutes and what are the latest evidences around that. At the same time, there's a parallel trend that's developing, which is lower physical activity. If you look at the WHO estimates, adults have been more inactive in India over time, and this is also happening in rural India. And as the data plays out in BMI, you'll see the same data play out in physical activity. Women are probably twice as inactive as men in India, especially in the range of, I think, 18 years to 65 years. And I think that's also true for older adults as well. So you see the trends are kind of mirroring each other. Just to add to the points that were made earlier, those were all excellent points. I would just like to say that BMI is just a function of, say, three variables, right? There's one which is what your body needs to survive and sustain. That's energy, right? So your body would spend energy just to stay alive and to fight diseases. So in India, there used to be a higher disease burden before. Now, with the advent of, say, the Swachh Bharat mission and other kinds of, say, even clean water that's more readily available, you're seeing some of these diseases drop. So the general metabolic load on the body has decreased a bit. So demands on energy just to stay alive and healthy are slightly lower. At the same time, you have the emergence of better roads, better communication. People have access to vehicles. People are buying more bicycles. So they're less physically active at the same time. And then the last one is what's going on the plate. What we've noticed through our surveys is that households in rural India especially tend to eat almost the same thing throughout the day. So if they cook something, they'll eat it for breakfast, they'll eat it for lunch, and they'll eat it for dinner. What's changing really is what they're eating in between. So it's the snack foods that are changing. And now if you look at the fact that historically India's always had samosas, India's had chaats, right? 2006 wasn't different. We've had that forever. That time we weren't seeing this obesity epidemic really, shoot up. So what has really changed in the food environment is what's come in. And that is in the form of greater accessibility to these ultra processed foods, right? So, and the choices that
children are making. Access to the ultra processed food, or is it access to food all the time? As a child, I'm not a Jatayu, but I do remember in 80s when I would go back to my bua's place, she would just close the kitchen, and this was early 80s. So if the breakfast was done, then I had to wait for lunch, and once the lunch was done, Professor Baru, I had to wait for dinner. So there were cycles in which I had nothing to eat. It was not that they wouldn't feed me, but the entire thing was खा लो, उसके बाद जब दोबारा मिलेगा तब खाना. तो बीच में there was no snacking.
So if I can come in there,
yes.
We did a survey in Nalanda, right? And we actually approached this. We asked about what people eat throughout the day, and we asked about snacking occasions. And believe it or not, snacking was the single most important driver of dietary diversity, both healthy and unhealthy. So if you just measure dietary diversity by the total food categories that somebody consumes, which includes healthy and unhealthy foods, that snacking drives that tremendously across the board. So you're right there. Like if you start consuming more foods in between main meals, what you're doing essentially is adding an additional 400 calories maybe per day, right? That is enough to shift the energy balance on the other side.
Okay.
So essentially, that's one of the contributing
Okay.
factors.
Okay. Let me go back to Professor Baru. Professor Baru, there are two things. We have a midday meal scheme throughout India. Is it very carbohydrate centric? Because when we talk about protein, it becomes such a taboo thing. Controversy eggs pe ho jati hai. Leave alone chicken and other foods which can be made part of the table. And secondly, do you think that what people at large consider very okay food is not nutritionally dense? It's like, what did you have? I had potatoes, dal, chawal. But it might be good, but it may not be nutritionally dense and 100% required for your body. But coming to that, do you think that the government intervention is also very carbohydrate centric for children?
I think there's much diversity in midday meal schemes, and there's been a long history and debate around this. I think it was informed by originally MGR's midday meal scheme, which tried to bring a balanced diet. And in fact, the National Institute of Nutrition played a very important role to define those diets. But I think what has really been happening is the quality of midday meal programs. As you know, they're only served in government schools because they are mandated to do it. Then they introduced eggs, which was a very, very good initiative. But then that has become controversial now, and there this thing of should you serve eggs or should you not serve eggs. So midday meals necessarily may not be, and also the quality of the midday meal, the quality of cooking, the quality of serving, all those things become important. But I want to slightly shift the focus to looking at the very important issue of not just diet diversity or availability of food, but how much food is actually being timely consumed. You see, when you look at the southern states and where women are going out to work, and I'm talking about women who are laboring women, I'm not talking about middle class professionals. What happens is the time to cook a meal has been completely reduced. So if you look at their dietary, a day in their dietary consumption, they begin maybe with a cup of chai and some maybe biscuits. Biscuits become a very important replacement in this whole story. And then they
healthy biscuits.
Yes, and then they don't eat for long hours. They may eat something like an idli or something, and then they work and they go back home, and the last meal becomes the big meal when they cook for the family. I'm talking about different types of examples. Now, what we find is that, women, you said about obesity, one is metabolic. It is a hormonal kind of change and shift. But more importantly, in our work on diabetes, we find that while they're prescribed by the doctor to do exercise, to walk at least 30 minutes a day, our built environments are not conducive to walking. And in many rural areas, there have been studies which show you that women do not feel safe to walk alone. They need to either walk in a group or they're walking with their husbands. And there is the whole gendered thing of male bonding and walking and having their own social life. So I think there is a serious impediment in our built environments. There are not adequate parks, there's not adequate, and it's worse for the working class and a little better for the middle and upper middle classes. Of course, those who go to gyms and work out, that's a completely different access to a different kind of exercise that is not available to a lot of women, even if they want to walk and exercise. So I think it's really quite complicated. And I like what you said about your aunt, your bua, closing the kitchen. When we were growing up in middle class India, there were 3 meals a day. And in the south, we had basically a 10 o'clock lunch. Then if best, there would be an idli in the evening, and then you would have a very light meal in the night. Speak to anyone who deals with obesity as clinicians. They'll tell you, please don't eat heavy in the night. But a lot of these patterns have changed. People eat late, they're drinking, I'm talking about social situation. They're eating very, very heavy, rich food at 10:30 in the night. And that is not okay. The East Asians eat by 6 and that's the end of the story. So we have enough evidence of these kinds of shifts which are not healthy for obesity.
Okay.
Clearly.
Let me take closing comment from Dr. Shumon. Is there also a genetic aspect to it? You know, I went through a Netflix series, I think a year ago, The Brown Heart. You know, okay, so you know, so is there a genetic aspect of our metabolism in obesity?
Genetic aspect in the sense, I would say there are a couple of factors that can contribute. Number one, historically, because as you know, there have been widely documented, say, series that have shown that all the droughts that the Indian population was subjected to during the colonization, that's led to an epigenetic response of the body to want to be thrifty when it comes to storing calories in general, right? So it's basically something historical that's been pushed on the population due to all of the shocks that we suffered back then. At the same time, Indians are, because we have such a protein poor diet and our environment is such that our height potential is not currently being met. So we have a shorter population in general, which again makes it easier for us to reach a level of BMI which puts us at risk. And then all the other metabolic conditions that emerge after that start to happen. So I would just put it there. I'm not like a medical doctor by training, so I don't want to get into the details of all of that. But I think from my perspective, those two factors are definitely important.
Okay. On this note, I thank both of you for this riveting conversation on obesity, the way rural and urban divide is getting merged. But my 2 cents here is that what I've seen is, Professor Baru, that ultra-processed food in this country is being sold as a healthy food. You know, and to my shock, I realized after doing my little bit of research that, for example, the protein shake, which is now so easily available even in rural India, people are substituting it for real food, not understanding the sort of impact it has on your body. And this is not the way the bodies are absorbing protein for last 1,000 years. So everything which is ultra processed is also being projected as nice, clean or vegan, green, healthy food. I think that is where, you know, the government needs to really crack down. Thank you and good night. This is all I had on point 2. And to my viewers, there is news and many more developments awaiting the other side of the break. Good night.
The National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test, NEET UG 2026, has been completely upended following a massive paper leak scandal.